The year basically kicks off with the fallout from D.C.K.O. And holy fuck does that shit hit hard. The entire storyline revolves around the Justice League going all in against Darkseid, who's trying to reshape reality using this absolute universe concept. And it turns into this massive, almost tournament-style cosmic war. Superman ends up at the emotional center of it, while characters like Batman and Wonder Woman are dealing with their own high-stakes battles. It's big, loud, and kind of insane, but the wild part is how it actually resets the stage for everything that comes after, instead of just being another crossover that doesn't matter. Once that shit wraps in early 2026, DC immediately pivots into the next phase, called DC Next Level. And fuck, this is where things get interesting. Instead of only focusing on the Trinity, DC starts pushing characters like Batwoman, Deathstroke, and Lobo into the spotlight. The whole idea is making stories that are easier to jump into without decades of baggage, but still connected to the main continuity. It's basically DC admitting, yeah, our shit got messy, and trying to fix it without a full reboot. The Bat Family side of things is especially wild as shit, because Gotham becomes a major focal point again. There's talk of a big Bad Seed storyline brewing in 2026 that's supposed to shake up the entire Bat corner of the universe. Joker is still lurking around, being unpredictable as fuck, while newer stories dig into legacy characters and sidekicks in darker, more grounded ways. It's less about clean heroics and more about messy consequences, which honestly fits Gotham perfectly. Meanwhile, Superman's world is going through some seriously heavy shit tied to cosmic threats like Doomsday. The storyline brings in this terrifying future version concept, the Time Trapper angle, and it basically tells Superman either help rule eternity or watch everything die, which is a pretty fucked ultimatum. Lois Lane even gets pulled deeper into the chaos. It's not just punch the monster stuff. It's existential dread layered on top of superhero drama. At the same time, DC is doubling down on its experimental side with the absolute universe. And this is where shit gets really wild. These stories completely reimagine characters without being chained to continuity. So you get darker, weirder versions of familiar heroes. Think alternate timelines, but with a purpose. It's not just a gimmick either. This line is becoming one of DC's biggest creative playgrounds. One of the biggest fucking moves in 2026 is the expansion of that Absolute line with titles like Absolute Green Arrow and Absolute Catwoman. And yeah, the tone here is straight up intense as shit. Green Arrow becomes part of a serial killer mystery involving corrupt elites, while Catwoman's story dives into her past and criminal rise in a globe-spanning narrative. These aren't your standard superhero books. They're closer to crime thrillers with superhero DNA. Then DC decides, why not crank this shit even higher? And announces a full-on Absolute Universe crossover event later in 2026. This is their first real attempt to tie all those alternate stories together, and it's supposed to be huge, but still accessible. The pitch is basically no confusing continuity, no decades of homework, just a big fucking event you can jump into and enjoy. Whether that actually works is another question, but the ambition is undeniable. Outside the mainline and Absolute stuff, DC is also playing around with weird and fun crossovers, like DC x Sonic the Hedgehog, the Metal Legion, which is exactly as chaotic as it sounds. You've got Justice League characters mashed up with Sonic characters, and somehow it's not total shit. It actually works, because it leans into the absurdity. It's DC showing they're willing to experiment, instead of just repeating the same formulas. There's also a noticeable push into different publishing styles and formats, like the continuation of compact graphic novels, and Vertigo-style storytelling coming back into focus. That means more self-contained, mature stories that don't rely on giant crossovers every 5 minutes. It's kind of a response to reader fatigue. Because let's be honest, not everyone wants to keep up with 10 interconnected titles just to understand one fucking storyline. Another important piece of the 2026 puzzle is how DC balances legacy and accessibility. You've still got ongoing series and classic characters doing their thing, but the company is clearly trying to lower the barrier to entry. Whether it's through Next Level or Absolute, the message is basically, you can start here. No need to read 40 years of shit first. That's a big shift from how comics used to operate. And yeah, while all this is happening in comics, it's clearly tied to DC's broader media strategy too. Projects like upcoming Supergirl and Green Lantern stories in other media are influencing what gets pushed in the comics, and vice versa. It's all part of a bigger plan to make DC feel more cohesive across movies, shows, and comics, instead of everything being disconnected as shit like it used to be. By the end of 2026, DC Comics feels like it's in a transitional but ambitious place. You've got the aftermath of a huge event, the launch of a new initiative, the expansion of an experimental universe, and a bunch of new series trying to redefine characters. Not all of it works perfectly. Some of the ideas are messy as fuck, but it's hard to say they're playing it safe. Overall, 2026 for DC is basically about reinvention without hitting the full reboot button, and that's a tricky balance of shit to pull off. They're trying to respect continuity while also making things fresh and accessible, and sometimes those goals clash. But if nothing else, the year proves DC is willing to take risks again. And honestly, that's what makes the whole thing worth paying attention to, even when the execution gets a little messy and weird as fuck. On top of all that, there's a clear shift in how DC treats villains. For years, big bads like Darkseid and Brainiac were these untouchable cosmic forces. But in 2026, you see storytelling that actually tries to humanize or recontextualize them. It doesn't always land cleanly, but the effort to make villains more than just punching bags is obvious. For instance, some of the Absolute Universe stories give antagonists motives that are twisted yet strangely relatable, like corruption born from trauma or warped ideals rather than pure megalomania. It's not only about the heroes anymore, it's about the why behind the chaos, which adds a whole new level of narrative complexity. Meanwhile, the industry around the comics is evolving too. Retailers and fans have been vocal about oversaturation, and DC seems to be listening, selectively. There's an emphasis on fewer, higher quality books with stronger creative teams, and an increase in standalone graphic novels that don't require tracking 15 monthly titles. Digital first and special edition releases are becoming more common as well, which keeps storytelling flexible and gives creators room to experiment without the pressure of traditional quarterly schedules. Some longtime readers grumble about the changes, but there's no denying the freshness it brings. Titles feel less like corporate checkboxes and more like genuine creative gambles. Finally, the thematic core of DC in 2026 isn't just reinvention or accessibility, it's consequence. Actions have weight, deaths have resonance, and legacy matters in ways it hasn't in years. Characters can't just reset after a crossover and go back to baseline. The world changes around them, and their choices ripple out. That makes some arcs heavier, more challenging, and honestly more interesting, even when it gets messy. Because for the first time in a long time, DC feels like a living universe again. One that's willing to evolve instead of just rebooting the same hits on loop. And yeah, that's risky as fuck, but it's also pretty exciting.